Welcome to 5 Minutes for Good, a place for leading voices to share initiatives that go beyond the commercial. In this second series, we're focusing on travel in Asia. We'll hear the flip side and discover what the travel industry is doing for good in that region. Following a short intro, guests will be given their 5 minutes for good, firing up the engines, inspiring action, and making us think that was 5 minutes well spent.
5
minutes for good. Welcome, Hazel McGuire, to your 5 minutes for good. Now, thank you for joining us in this second series of the podcast, where this time we're focusing on travel in Asia. But Hazel, before we get into your 5 minutes for good, tell those who don't necessarily know you a little about yourself.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Phil. My name is Hazel McGuire. I am the Chief Marketing Officer for Intrepid Travel. I have worked across the travel industry for many years and have been with Intrepid now for 3.5. And Intrepid Travel, for those of you who may not know us, we are the world's largest small group adventure touring company. We've got some 900 different trips around the world. And we specialise in small group adventures that bring people together and sort of really celebrate positive change through the joy of travel, and really bringing people together to really, I guess, break down some of those barriers and really enjoy that connection that you get from travel. And that's connection with other travelers, but also connections with the communities and the people that you have the chance to speak to and engage with whilst you're traveling.
Fabulous. Well, Hazel, this is your moment. And this is why I say, Hazel, this is your 5 minutes for good. Over to you.
Oh. Well, to set the scene, I had such an amazing opportunity given to me in March this year. There was a PR and global community trip which was taking place in Nepal. And this was for our women's expedition. And I was asked to join as the spokesperson from the organization. And this was my first time in Nepal, and it was also the first time on one of our women's expeditions. And just to give you a quick snapshot of what our women's expeditions are, we launched women's expeditions in 2018. We've got 5 itineraries, which are in India, Morocco, Nepal, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. And the idea with the women's expeditions is not only are the travelers all female, but all of the leaders and all of the crew are also female. And we visit female-led businesses and interact with women on the ground. Now, quite often, if you think about the destinations that I've mentioned there, what we're also trying to do is challenge some stereotypes and give people an opportunity to hear from women who perhaps in the past have been more marginalized or who haven't had a voice as loud as they may have. So this is a really great opportunity to sort of open that door and encourage conversation in a way that actually allows our travellers to hear from people who live there, and quite often breaks down some misconceptions as well as challenges on both sides. And I think it's also an opportunity for female leaders and guides and crew to have access to roles that historically, again, may not have been open to them. So, for example, if I go to my time in Nepal, we had an entire crew, as I say, who were all female, including Shrishti, who was our tour leader. Now, she was one of the very, very first porters and crew in the Himalayas and sort of leading groups in that way. So, you can imagine carrying sort of weighty packs up the mountain, and really sort of challenging that misconception or preconception, I suppose, that men could really only do these jobs. Now, there are differences. So women will carry smaller packs than men, for example, because that's a physicality. But at the same point, it's giving women opportunity to do jobs that were very male-dominated, particularly in the case of Nepal. And so it's something that, for me, hearing from Shrishti and having her talk to the fact that her family, she's one of the first in her family to have a job outside of the home, and certainly to have a job in this area, to sort of have to be a tour leader. And when I spoke to some of our porters, they were also talking to the fact that, again, they were the first in their family to go and have a job and actually travel away from home. And they also spoke to some of the challenges that they'd had speaking to their family about the possibility of a role in the first instance, because women staying away from home, particularly once they have children and they're married, is not really as common as it might be in some other countries. So for them, it was about having to talk to their families about what Intrepid was, how the company was run. Quite often it was about making connections with other people who worked for the company so that they could speak to others and understand that how the company worked and how the trips worked, and also understand that they were going to lead women's expeditions. So again, it was all women who were traveling with them. So it's just this sort of real ability to dig into something, I think, when you're in a group like that, and to really understand something that, you might have an idea about, but actually hearing it from people who have lived experience is just really, really fascinating, and actually much more eye-opening than, reading about it or reading sort of, I guess, in some respects, media perceptions of things as well. And for us, when we look at our women's expeditions and how they've grown over time, what we have found is that we have high growth in females over 45. And anecdotally, we've had a lot of people who said, I've lived quite a sort of, the way that you almost expect your life to go, got married, had children, had that period of my life where I had to almost give my sort of agency across to looking after children. And now I want to do something for myself. And, I don't want to wait for my friends to have to go at the same time as me. And I want to go and experience something myself. And this is a way to solo travel, but with the genuine connection that you get from a group as well. And again, what amazed me, actually, and I've done mixed tours. This was my first women's expedition, but I've done mixed tours before. But quite honestly, the speed at which the group dropped into a real close connection and bond between each other was really fascinating to see, because it's not as fast in a mixed group, which is an interesting thing. And I just wonder whether there's a sense of just barriers not necessarily having to be there when you have a single-sex group. And, we were having conversations, very open and honest conversations about loss and about, people's sort of sense of themselves. And there was a lot of deep connection that was happening very, very early from a group of people who didn't know each other before we went, and who, on the face of it, all very successful women. These were content creators and journalists and people on the outside that present a very sort of very positive and very kind of confident image. But actually, again, opening up to each other and having these very deep conversations very early in the trip, which I loved. And I thought what was also so fantastic was that we were having those same conversations with the crew and with the leaders that we were traveling with as well. So it really was that breaking down, not only of, the traveler boundaries, but also those connections with people in Nepal as well, which we wouldn't necessarily have had the opportunity to meet in any other scenario than in this particular one.
I was going to say that I think what's really interesting is that the breaking down of those barriers, and that you realise that there are many cultural differences that actually within ourselves we're all so similar. We've all got the same problems, although the problems are slightly different, but they are the same.
Yeah, and I think what we speak to quite a lot within Intrepid is the fact that in a world which is increasingly divided, it feels as though actually personal connection and maintaining those abilities to have conversations with other people is one of the best ways that we possibly can to try and encourage people to see good in the world, versus to sort of try and see difference or otherness, which I think, unfortunately, and without wishing to get political, but unfortunately in a lot of political scenarios at the moment, the otherness is the piece that's sort of emphasised rather than the connection and the commonality that we have with our fellow human beings. So actually, being in that experience, even for a few days, was just, it did bring that sort of real sense, and it sounds really kind of, almost like an overstatement, but it quite genuinely made me feel very happy and just very centered. And actually, wow, this is just a really fantastic experience. And I think the other thing about the women's expedition and the way that we build the product is that we also look for experiences that are led by females within that country as well. Or we go to places where perhaps men aren't actually allowed to go. So in our case, one experience which I absolutely loved was visiting a Tibetan refugee camp in Nepal, in Pokhara. And this refugee camp has been there for years. So it's a long-term, and I say camp, but it's got sort of, the houses are, they're built houses and things. So it's, but these women and the men as well who lives there, they don't necessarily have the same rights as Nepalese people. So they don't necessarily have the right to work within the wider community, and they are, they don't have the right to own property and some of the other access rights. But what we've been able to do is actually go in and we make momos with one of these women. And she has lived there now all of her life. She was born there. Her parents came across from Tibet. And she now has the ability to make money and to earn money within her home in this camp, and actually share her story as well, which again, the fact that she's lived there. And again, it's such an interesting story that you don't necessarily have that many things that you can connect it to in your own life. But at the same point, what she's saying is, we saw her daughter there and her granddaughter, and she's saying, this is, I helped my daughter look after my granddaughter, and and all of these kind of things. And you think we all have very similar situations and very similar kind of setups. So again, more commonality than difference, and just a really fascinating way to engage both with cooking demonstration, but a way to bring money into the community, in a community that at times finds it more difficult to earn money than it could be otherwise. So that was fantastic. And another experience actually, which was very interesting, was going to visit Buddhist nuns and actually going in for a tour of the Buddhist temple with the nun, and sitting and having a conversation about how she found herself to be a nun and how she had come to actually be educated before she decided to become a nun. But then she decided very early to enter the nunnery and has lived there all her life. And what I remember a story she told us about something she called her monkey mind, or not her monkey mind, but she said what's really fascinating is that when she sees and speaks to women from outside, she sees that they find it very difficult to quiet their mind because there's so many things going on. She said, you might have a family, you might have a job, you might have all of these these pieces sort of challenging your time. And she said she finds, because she has taken the route to become a nun, she says that she finds that she can quieten her brain and she can consider and she can think. But actually she challenges people to try, not necessarily to become a nun, but actually to sit and quieten your mind, to actually give yourself that opportunity to consider and think a bit more deeply. And again, that was fascinating because, isn't it, there's people in the UK that spend thousands of pounds to try and get these bits of information. And to hear this from a woman sitting in a temple in Nepal, it was honestly, the experience was so insightful.
You can resonate with it. I mean, I'm just listening to you there, and all of our, daily issues, which we all have. It's so true that the world over, nobody's any different.
No. And this is the thing. It was just this, again, just seeing these little strands of just issues or moments of joy that actually somebody in Nepal who's being a portrait or who, has never left Nepal versus a woman who might have traveled to multiple countries with her job as a content creator. And yet that connection of saying, do you know what, that moment where you get to sit and be quiet, or that moment when you get to enjoy a cup of chai together, or that moment where you just get that moment of peace, it was as important for every single woman there. And we all brought very different lived experiences. Even the people who were traveling together, we all came from very different backgrounds. We all came from, different places and different sort of family circumstances. So again, there was just that real sense, again, and I've said it before, but that connection, that positive energy that comes from understanding that people are more similar than different, and actually that those differences actually add a layer of extra to those conversations versus it being something that's a negative or something that should be seen as a negative. So yeah, I think, it was really, I mean, quite honestly, quite a life-changing experience from the perspective that just seeing that, played out, and really just looking at also the kind of the ripple effect, I suppose, of the product as well. Because, at the end of the day, there was a huge amount of benefit for the travellers. But in actual fact as well, where you looked at the money staying in local communities and the money going to women who perhaps hadn't had as much opportunity to provide for their family previously, or who might not have been able to have a job otherwise, or who may have found themselves in a family circumstance that meant that they suddenly needed to provide for their family. And being able to sort of see that ripple effect and have conversations and understand it at the same time. It was fantastic.
Well, before I round that off, I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
How did you feel when you got back from that trip?
It was really interesting. I actually went straight from that trip to Melbourne to take on the role that I'm in now. I had been in a role in the UK previously. And to actually go into my new role, having just had that experience, I honestly felt like I couldn't have done something better to set me up to feel like, one, from a personal standpoint, I'm in the right place. I'm working for a company that I really believe in, and I really want to be part of and want to impact. But from a personal level, just having some of those moments where I felt such a deep connection with other humans, it sort of restored a little bit of faith in humanity at a time when, in honesty, if you think about March and what was happening in America at the time and things, and what continues to happen in a lot of cases and in the UK, unfortunately, as well, it just quite genuinely showed me that I don't think people are not bad inherently. And I think, people given that opportunity to connect and converse, that is hugely powerful. And I honestly felt just coming away sort of almost with this sort of lightness of spirit, if that doesn't sound too sort of new world, but it was, it genuinely impacted me from that perspective.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's what is a life experience without any doubt. I mean, that's really interesting. It's interesting because, of course, this is 5 minutes for good. I could give you 25 minutes for good. It's such an interesting, avenue that you've been down and you're bringing to us that really I could listen to you all day. But it was just absolutely magical. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, Hazel, before we close, it's time to drop your guard and go a little bit off-piste. And I'm going to ask you if there was one thing you could do for 5 minutes that isn't necessarily for good, what might that be?
So it's not necessarily for good from the perspective that it's quite self-serving. I would absolutely love to be like Usain Bolt or one of the kind of real super fast. I just would love to do I'd love to do a race at the Olympics as like one of the super fast athletes, because my goodness, I would love to understand the freedom of mind that you must get for those split seconds of just, I cannot concentrate on anything other than making my body move as fast as it humanly possibly can from here to there. And I just think that must be fascinating. Like, is your mind completely clear? Are you thinking about your step technique and your breathing, or do you just literally transcend all of that and just literally human power? I just think that would be fascinating. So that would be what I would do. Not really for good, because it wouldn't serve anything other than my imagination and my understanding.
Would you do Usain Bolt, Firebolt?
Oh, I mean, if I could, my son would love that. He went through a stage of liking doing that, and also something else that a footballer does that I can't remember. He's 7, so he's very into those types of things as well.
Well, Hazel McGuire, thank you. That was 5 minutes well spent.
That was 5 minutes well spent.